some of these values of the city upon a hill that Reagan mentions?
They can help others
Help others, right.
and achieve the dream to have peace.
Okay. What else? Very good. Other countries, right. So, very good. Particularly like countries where people live, and he says police states. Right? Police states. What is a police state? It's where people, for example, country where you're being monitored all the time. Where when you go in and out of the subway, maybe pictures of your face, facial recognition, or how you spend your money is being monitored. People are afraid to do anything. They're afraid to speak about the government. They're afraid to speak about things that happened in the past. And what else? So he says religious and social discrimination. That's always been a really important thing for Americans, is to protect religious minorities, which is why they've always helped Israel. So religious or social discrimination, those who are persecuted. And he says it's not about manifest destiny. This is one of those maybe 3 terms that I'd like you to leave this class with knowing. Manifest destiny. I'm guessing most people don't know what this is. The idea of manifest destiny was that European people coming from Europe into America, that it was their right to take over the whole continent, and as it was their right as white people to go and do that. And it meant that a lot of Native Americans were killed. They were moved to different places, to like Oklahoma. They were taken away from where they were. It was a way of justifying cruelty, really. And so this is one of those things that Obama's going to talk about too. You know, the United States has ideals, but it's also had a lot of terrible things it's done. And this is one of them, manifest destiny, the idea of being conquering the whole continent. It didn't matter the Native Americans, get rid of them, kill them, put them into settlements. So he's saying that's not the idea of America that I have. The idea of America that I have is more like what John Winthrop said. It's about mercy. It's about helping those who are persecuted, etc. It goes back to that city upon a hill. He mentions Taiwan. He doesn't mention China as an ally, as a friend, but that they would like to be friends with China. But Taiwan is an ally. Why do you think Taiwan? Do you think Taiwan has any of these ideas? Taiwan is a city on a hill in East Asia. Do you think Taiwan is a city on a hill compared to some of the countries around, or just in general? Taiwan has done a lot in Latin America. They send a lot of money over there to help invest, right? And they don't really get much in return, except for recognition of the country as a sovereign state. But they do a lot. So yeah, anything else that you think though of the city on a hill that we've talked about from John Winthrop and from Reagan? Any of these ideas that we think of as American, do you think that they could be Taiwanese too? Do you have like an evil emperor that tells everybody what to do? No. Who's the head of state here? Yeah, president, right? Who you can get rid of when you want. Next election, you're not happy. So, does that remind you of anything from John Winthrop or from Reagan? Is it the government telling people what to do, or is it the people that decide?
Well, people have free to choose the government.
Exactly. Okay. Great. So that's similar when you think about the Puritans going to America and they decide that they're gonna make the choices themselves. Anything else? Or any differences? Are you a very religious country or not? No. Were you ever a religious country? Okay, so that's a difference, right? Any other differences? How about like with respect to persecution or anything else?
Oh, when the earthquake happened in Japan, we helped them.
Okay. And you're a much smaller country, right?
Yes.
So, and not as rich.
Taiwan donate the most money.
So that would be, we would call that then generosity, right? Mercy, lots of things.
Hope.
great, help, but not having to help. We can answer that question too further when we see Obama's interpretation, the way he talked about the city on a hill. I just wanted to give the background of this speech. So as you know, Obama's very different from Ronald Reagan in many ways. Ronald Reagan, you didn't get to see him. We didn't have him up there, right? Didn't see his image, but he was an older man when he became president. Until Trump, he was the oldest person to ever be president. I think he was 68 when he went into office, right? Which was old, and now Trump started 72, wasn't it? So Trump's the oldest president ever now. But so Reagan was 68. He had been a governor of California, the biggest state in the country, for 8 years. He was an actor before that, Western movies, cowboy type movies, yeah. And he was very, very conservative. He was the opposite of a liberal. He was very conservative. Even his own party, the Republican Party, thought he was a little crazy because he was talking about small government. He was talking, he was talking about religious principles, which Jimmy Carter had one of, but Reagan was very religious. So he was a little different. And Obama was young when he ran for president. He was 46. Obama is talking in a historical period. You guys, I don't know if you remembered what 2006 was like, but it was, it was coming after 9/11. You know what 9/11 is, right? It's coming after 9/11, just a few years really. And all these wars against terrorism, the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war. People were tired of George Bush, the president. They were sick of him. They wanted something different, and it wasn't a really good time. And then right after 2006, when Obama gives this speech, 4 minutes that we're going to see, after this, the whole world falls apart. There's a big financial crisis, the housing crisis, and everything goes into recession. It's just a bad time. So this is right before that. And so think about it as, in some ways, being like when Reagan was talking. It was not a great time for people. And people were losing hope. That's why he started his campaign. Do you remember what his slogan word was? No? Hope. Hope and change. The Republicans made fun of it, but it was hope. That was it. Hope. So let's go to 4:40, and we're going to listen to 6 minutes and then just discuss this.
It's your turn to keep this daringly radical but unfailingly simple notion of America alive. That no matter where you're born or how much your parents have, no matter what you look like or what you believe in, you can still rise to become whatever you want. Still go on to achieve great things. Still pursue the happiness that you hope for. Today, this dream sounds common. It's even become a cliche. Yet for most of human history, it's been anything but. As a servant in Rome, a peasant in China, or a subject of King George, there were very few unlikely futures. No matter how hard you worked or struggled for something better, you knew you'd spend your life forced to build somebody else's empire, to sacrifice for somebody else's cause. But as the centuries passed, the people of the world grew restless. They were tired of tyranny and weary of their lot in life. And as they saw merchants start to sail across oceans and explorers set off in search of new worlds, they followed. And it was right here, right in these waters, where the American experiment began. As the earliest settlers arrived on the shores of Boston and Salem and Plymouth, they dreamed of building a city on a hill. And the world watched, waiting to see if this improbable idea called America would succeed. For over 200 years, it has. Not because our dream has progressed perfectly, it hasn't. It's been scarred by our treatment of native peoples, betrayed by slavery and Jim Crow, clouded by the subjugation of women, shaken by war and depression. Yet the true test of our union is not whether it's perfect, it's whether we work to perfect it. Whether we recognize our failings, identify our shortcomings, and then rise to meet the challenges of our time. And so we broaden the American family by winning civil rights and voting rights for women and then African Americans, by choosing to welcome waves of new immigrants to our shores. We've pushed the boundaries of opportunity by providing free education for our children and health care for our seniors and our poor. And we've won bargaining rights and wage hikes and retirement security for our workers. None of this has happened on its own. Much of it seemed impossible at the time, but all of it came about because ordinary men and women were willing to engage in the hard work of doing extraordinary things, because they had faith that here in America, our imperfect dream could be perfected. Now, there may be some who doubt that much has changed. Those who doubt that things are better today than they were yesterday. For those who believe that, take a look at this class of 2006. More than half, representing the very first members of their family ever to attend college, in the most diverse university in New England. I look out at a sea of faces that are African American and Hispanic American and Asian American and Arab American and Anglo American. I see students who've come here from 100 different countries, believing, like those first settlers, that they too could find a home in that city on a hill. That they too could find success in the unlikeliest of places. All this has occurred in the midst of a city where no Irish need apply signs once hung from stores. All of this city in a place where just 30 years ago, buses of black students were pelted with rocks as they pulled into schools in South Boston, where the Red Sox were once the team who refused to sign the great Jackie Robinson. But the problem isn't that we haven't made progress. We have. The problem is that the progress still isn't good enough. There's more work to be done. More justice. There's more work to be done. There's more justice to be had. There are more barriers to break down. And now it's your generation's turn to bring those changes about. Now, the last century was undoubtedly the American century. Our victory over fascism and communism liberated millions. At home, we built a shared prosperity that created the largest middle class in history. Ours was a nation of liberators, of free people, of prosperous people, and the world took notice. But today, just a few years into the 21st century, we've already found ourselves in a different and sometimes precarious position. As revolutions in communications and technology have broken down barriers across the world, it's given more power to both our competitors and to our enemies.
Okay, so we talk about here a city on a hill. Let me just go over what he says is all these things are in the past. He talks about the American experiment, right? This improbable idea. What is improbable? Yeah, unlikely, exactly. Not impossible, because impossible means it definitely won't happen. Improbable is that it's likely it won't happen. That it's an improbable idea. So if we go back to John Winthrop, when they went to America, he's talking about most people don't believe that this can succeed, that these people with these religious values, without a king, can create a community that actually where people help each other, that most people don't believe in it, but we are going to be that city on a hill. And then Reagan says, hundreds of years later, that city on a hill exists. But what Obama's saying is something else. That he's saying, yes, there's a city on a hill, but are there problems? Have there been problems in the past? Danny, what kind of problems does he talk about?
About they don't let women have the right to vote.
Okay, so there was a time when the women could not vote. What else?
Don't let African American go to school.
Okay, so that he talks about busing, which is in the 1960s when black people had always gone to different schools, and then white people went to different ones, and they started to bus, meaning they would take black people to white schools. So he's saying this happened, right? The busing. And then he talks about this Boston, because he's giving the speech in Boston. This was the city where it used to say, no Irish need apply. No Irish need apply. So Boston was mainly settled by people from England initially, right? When the Irish people used to come in, when they started coming in, the people of British descent would start discriminating against the Irish. And so he was saying about there would be stores or businesses that would say, we don't want Irish people working for us. Right? He talks about Jim Crow laws. Those were the laws after slavery that said that black people had to be in their place and go to their schools and stay on segregation. Right. Stay on what they would say. Stay on your side of the fence. We'll stay on our side of our fence. White people will stay on our side of the fence, and you will stay on your side of the fence. So he says, even in spite of all of this, why is America still a city on the hill, even with this terrible history of slavery and killing the natives and all of this? How is America still a city on a hill? This is the term he used, broaden the American family. What does broaden mean? It means to make it bigger. That's really what he says, that even with all this, the idea of the American family has grown. So it's not just people of British descent who come on that ship. It starts to include Irish people, and then Italians, eventually Asians, and then eventually Hispanics, and eventually blacks, or whatever. So it starts to grow. It includes women. So the idea of justice grows and grows, and that's the only thing that keeps it being a city on a hill, is that people are willing to change, to see the past and try to correct it by this. I think is the key term: broaden the American family. Ordinary men and women willing to engage in the hard work of doing extraordinary things. I think that would be the other big thing that he said. What do you think that means? Ordinary men and women willing to engage in the hard work of doing extraordinary things. So that, I think, that's something Reagan touches on in his speech, and John Winthrop does, that it's not special people doing special things. Like, going back to what you said initially in the beginning, Danny, does it mean that Americans think that they're better than everybody? In this idea, does it mean that Americans think that they're better than they are, than everybody else? But probably most Americans do think they're better than others. But I'm talking about in this speech, or in Reagan's speech, he's saying no. He's saying we're just ordinary. So what makes us do extraordinary things? This is the key part. How is it that ordinary people can do extraordinary things? What makes that possible? Human rights. Okay, good. Anybody else? What else makes that possible?
They work hard.
They work hard, but so did you mentioned Chinese peasants or people living under King George. They worked hard too, but they were working hard for somebody else's.
Well, they work hard for themselves.
Right. Dr. Troy and I were talking about that the other night. That's definitely a part of the culture. Anybody else? How can ordinary people do extraordinary things? Okay, they have money, but what if they don't have money? Well, he mentions, though, in his speech that people who were able to come with nothing and have something, what makes that possible? Okay, So, right, other people's help. So whether that be through, like, allowing women to vote or civil rights, because I mean, it's really hard to do extraordinary things if you're in a separate school, or like the Irish, you're told you can't work there. So broadening the American family, meaning like giving rights to other people who, when they first come, you say, no, you're not good enough, but then giving rights. So, so the last few minutes that we have together, what I would ask you is, so you listen to these speeches, right? We've listened through all of them. We've discussed some really important ideas about the American experiment, how it is that a group of people that create their own society and don't have a government on top of them. What would you take away from what we've talked if we were talking about American politics? Now we remember at the beginning when Claire was talking about what you might mention. Say you're at a party, what might you say about politics, about American politics? Like I said, talk about these ideas, which are, really important, and people are not talking about them. That's the thing is, like, people aren't talking about them anymore. They're talking about why they hate Trump and about the Mexicans and this and the other. So you actually can remind Americans about the ideas that are important. So let's just say, like, I'm having an argument with somebody who doesn't like Trump. I like Trump. We're fighting about it, right? What might you tell me to stop the fight, to remind me about why the country is a city of light? Because it doesn't feel like that anymore when people are fighting so badly. I've never seen such fighting and hatred as I see now in the United States. It's awful. It's really awful. The speeches of Ronald Reagan and Obama, and these are very politically different presidents. They couldn't be more different in so many ways. They had similar ideas. So that means that even though we may have different politics, perhaps we have a similar vision that might unite us.